taking the time to really highlight some of his achievements and the work that he has done in government administration and governance. And one of the most important things for Geingob, of course, was the need for economic development and economic prosperity for Namibia. If you look back at his last head of mission address, the 9th session that took place in November last year, he, of course, changed the Namibian foreign policy direction to look at economic diplomacy. And that's how important this topic around economic development and investment was for him. At the same time as well, we of course know as a country we've been working on a new bill that seeks to promote investment promotion across different sectors. And at the same time as well, we've been seeing quite a lot of work taking place with conversations and consultations taking place around a local content policy for the country. So the real question really is, if we're looking at some of the new industries of Geingob, the futurists, the investments in green hydrogen and oil and gas, how are Namibians going to benefit from this going forward? And who really owns these resources? And I'm joined by an apt panel to focus on the oil and gas industry and investment in that industry for this morning. I'll start off, of course, on my immediate right, the head of sustainability at NAMCOR, Mr. Franz Kalenga, just to give us the position of government and, of course, our stake in the industry as well. A very good morning to you, and thank you so much for making time out to join us.
Thank you for having me, Ricardo.
Director of Communications and Stakeholder Relations from Recon Africa, representing, of course, the private sector IOCs. They are doing a lot of work onshore, of course, significant investment in there as well for the last few years. She'll be joining us to just give us the private sector's input as well. Thank you so much, Dape Oshale, for making time out for us.
Thank you so much, Ricardo, for having me.
And who are we without somebody to explain the law to us, as we are a country, of course, that are law-abiding citizens, always make sure that the systems and processes are adhered to. We're joined by Shakwa Nambe from SNC Incorporated, of course, expert in energy, natural resources, and commercial law. Has been dealing a lot with the IOCs as well, just to reflect on what the law says about the industry. Where are Namibians protected? The question around ownership, as well as what are investors looking for from outside that want to bring capital to invest in the country. Mr. Nyambe, thank you so much for making time out to join us.
Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. It's my pleasure to be here.
And of course, we also have joining us online, I'm sure he will show up now on screen, the chairperson of the Africa Energy Chamber is, of course, joining us online. They conferred a serious award, a Lifetime Achievement Award to the President last year at the Africa Energy Week as well. A very good morning to you, and thank you so much, Mr. Ayuk, for making time out to join us. He will be, of course, giving us a continental perspective in terms of the President's ambitions for the industry. Thank you so much, Mr. Ayuk, for making time out to join us.
Thank you, it's an honor.
Well, let's get straight into the conversation for this morning. I think if you can start with you, Shakwa, on the conversation around ownership. What does the Constitution say about natural resource ownership in Namibia?
Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. I think it's been a heated topic sometime, but I think the bottom line is that the resources belongs to the Namibian people. The resources belongs to the state, and I'll break it down how the state control and manages the resources. So your first legal framework or regulatory framework for ownership of the resources is the Constitution. We know what Article 100 says: the land, the water, the natural resources above and below the sea belongs or vests in the states. So when it comes to mineral resources, be it gold, diamond, oil and gas, the state is vested with the control and the management in a way that they're the ones who allocate and give the rights. This can be exploration rights, production rights, even recognizes rights. So they'll give these types of licenses. Then they regulate the duration, they regulate the work program you should do, they regulate the environmental consideration which should be complied with, and they give sort of penalties that if you don't do this and you don't do this, this is what happens to you. So at the end, the oil companies, the mining companies will have these rights, but the ultimate control of these resources still vests with the state. So you see that there are other legal rights the state has which imposes on the companies. These are the tax in terms of what is the petroleum tax to be paid, what is the royalties to be paid, and then additional profit tax. So all those are imposed on the money and all companies, and then they have to pay that to the state. There's obligation in terms of environment. There's obligation in terms of rehabilitation. We call it decommissioning in oil and gas law. So all those obligations, if they are not complied with, then you can be penalized. So that's what gives the states the ultimate control. And in addition to that, you have the state being represented by state-owned entities like NAMCO, for example, in the oil and gas, like Ipangelo in the mining sector. And then in the diamond, the government is part of the 50-50 joint venture. So all those resources now, even the profits which comes, it ends up accruing to the states. So the right to explore and to do all these things will be given to the oil companies. But the ultimate control, which now vests in the states, which now ends up accruing the benefits to the nation and Namibian people, is under the control of the government. So I think in brief, I'll touch on that later. So it's the same thing also. You see that in the Petroleum Exploration Production Act, you have almost the same provision. But it tells you, despite your rights to exploration, production, the ultimate control still vests, because those rights are still being controlled by the state. However, these are expensive exercises. So government needs to get somebody to do it for them by allocating the rights. For you to drill a well offshore Namibia, for example, you need to pay, it will cost you not less than $60 million. In Namibian dollars, that's a lot of money. So that risk is taken out by these companies. And then they are given certain rights, from the work program, from the fiscal regime, and how they'll benefit. And then the state also has a certain benefit on it.
Mr. Ayuk, since you're talking about ownership of natural resources, can you just reflect on that? I think giving us a bit of a continental perspective. If you look at the historical perspective as well, in terms of how traditional the ownership of natural resources has been on the continent, the criticisms around exploitation, etc., vis-a-vis how that is now changing more to more equitable partnerships with African governments in as far as natural resource ownership is concerned.
Thank you, and thank you for that. I think Shaka gave a very good description on Namibia. I think most of Africa kind of looks, does the same. When you look across the continent of Africa, natural resources are basically the same as you see in Namibia, owned by, first of all, they're owned by the people, but there's state control. But I also think that we have to be forward-thinking and forward-looking as to where we look at. When you look at natural resource and you look at issues around the resource curves, it's always been an issue where you even expand it further and look at property rights issue. What if you find these resources in my backyard? Does that belong to me, or does that still belong to the state? And I think that healthy conversation is happening across the continent. And you know why? Because we've not governed these resources very well. I'll give you an example, and I wrote about this in my book, Billions at Play. One of the key things that we need to consider doing as we expand these rights around who the resources belong to, we have to look at how we then look at the communities where the resources are found, and get these communities to create trust funds where you could invest in education, healthcare, infrastructure. That's how you really start impacting who really owns that, because you saw issues, for example, in countries like Nigeria, around the Niger Delta, where a lot of people there could not really see those benefits. You've seen issues in Ghana, where a lot of people couldn't see benefits, and the Congo, and you look at Brazzaville. So I think this is a very healthy and more expanded conversation. And I think Namibia also stands in a very, very unique position. Being the new country that has great potential to produce hydrocarbons, that discussion, that healthy debate should be had among its citizens and its decision makers onto how you want to govern that, because there's a lot of lessons that you've seen across the continent that you could learn from.
I think that's a very important input there as well. And I think in terms of that ownership, of course, there's different ways to secure benefits for Namibians. One of those ways is the participation of state-led institutions like NAMCOR. Step into this conversation around ownership and how the kind of role NAMCOR plays in sort of making sure that the benefits accrue to Namibians as well.
Thank you, Ricardo. Indeed, beneficiation is the order of the day. But if you look at the institution like NAMCO, what it's really a mandate for is really to derive benefits from the potential of hydrocarbons, be it from the exploration and the production for it, so that eventually it comes back to the state, and then state is able to distribute that equally to the nation. What is very important is that in honor of the president, we truly believe that, as he always said, that he was a man of institution, systems and processes. And from that leadership already you can see the institution of NAMCO coming in, the institution of the Ministry of Mines and Energy coming in. All this to make sure that the natural resources of the country brings about value to the country. Now, as NAMCO, we hold equity in different licenses with different international companies. But what is very important is that whether we hold this interest, we are all governed, as Shakwa has mentioned, that we have a regulatory framework that is there, which is the Petroleum Act. And within the Petroleum Act, there is now the derivation of the Model Petroleum Agreement that directs in how the agreement or the relationship between the government and the state and the international companies is going to go further. Further down in that, then you find what you call the Joint Operating Agreement, where NAMCO now has a joint operating agreement with these companies to make sure that this is how we are going to form our partnership. What is the level of participation of the Namibian skilled people? What is the level of participation of the local communities? That's why we have come to a conclusion now towards the end of last year, so that as a country we need what we call a local content policy. That local content policy is very, very important, because there was this perception that there was no benefits being cascaded down to the ordinary Namibian. Now, benefits comes in different forms. When you look, or if you try to unpack that local content policy, it's looking at 4 areas, of which one is how do we capacitate the local companies in terms of participation in the oil and gas. That we are talking about funding. How can the financial institution be able to come together and support these small, medium enterprises? It's talking about job creation. How do we make sure that really in the oil and gas, it's not only our colleagues within the mature industry that are coming to work in the country, but we have our own Namibians that are able to work here. It's talking about skills transfer and technology. We know that with time comes also with technology, and this technology needs to be transferred to the Namibian people so that we are on par, so that decision making is quicker. And lastly, but importantly also, in the capacitation in terms of education, how are we training our people? How are we upscaling our people? So NAMCO is very fundamental in helping also the Ministry of Mines and Energy to make sure that this local content policy comes to pass. At the level of what Shakwa has mentioned in terms of royalties, corporate tax, we have the Taxation Act that regulates
the Companies Tax Act.
Yes, yes. So we are all inclined to follow through that. Is how does the state really derive its benefits?
So we're saying in terms of the legal provisions that are already there, of course, we can still sort of accrue maximum benefit out of the industries, but that means that first we need the money to be invested. First, we need the investors to come to the country. And I'm pointing this out because a bit earlier on, of course, in the program, we had shared an insert where we were looking at the president presenting in Britain to the Chamber of British Business People already in 1992 saying, listen, Namibia is open for business. We take our economic development quite seriously. And already then he was pointing out what are the benefits, why people should come and invest in here. I want to ask the IOC, of course, as Recon Africa, you've made significant investment in the country so far. What are some of the factors that attract that sort of investment? Why do you want to come and spend this money and invest in the oil and gas industry in the country?
Well, thank you very much, Ricardo. First of all, before even, of course, it's the resource, the potential for the resource that invites you into the country. That's the first point of departure. But most importantly, and like you said, the president has, over the years, over the decades, really always emphasized that, and I'll highlight a few, ease of doing business. Importantly, stability. And stability is regulatory stability. Not that one day the law says the one thing and then tomorrow the country changes it.
That's certainty in the law.
That's certainty. Stability and certainty in the law, and then you also have stability, political stability. You also have stability in the country in terms of operations. Again, also ease of doing business. We see that the president has set up the NIPDB, and that body is really to say that we are taking care of the investor for the purpose of development and promotion in the country. So as an international company doing business here, the importance really is certainty, regulatory certainty, stability from a political perspective, as well as also ease of doing business. And there must also be a sort of a teamwork, a collaboration between the IOC and the government to say that how do we work together for the benefit, firstly, of the Namibian people, and then, of course, for the business, because at the end of the day, it is a business. So I would highlight that as the three important pointers for any country to be able to invite investment. And Namibia has done very well in that. We can, again, the president's statement that Macaulay Kalenga said, institutions, systems, and processes. That's number one. And we've seen that with the transition, we are being praised all over the world for the smooth transition, where the constitution was applied to the unfortunate circumstances we found ourselves in. Those are also things that go when the internationals look at how are things done in Namibia. That is regulatory certainty, that is political stability, and again also we look at now the other systems such as the NIPDB for ease of doing business.
Let's get Shaka quickly in.
I want to add something to what Sheponale has said now, and also to demonstrate to the people out there how President Geingob has done to attract investment, firstly in the energy sector, drive it and promote these investors to keep on doing the great work. It's connected to the question on what attracts the investors. And having presented a lot of these international oil companies, as well as mining companies, you get to understand what they want. So when they come into a new country, they look at three things, mostly in the oil and gas. Firstly, they look at the geology. How is the geology? Is it attractive? They move to the next question, is the physical terms. How are the physical terms? Are they attractive? Have a take. Then they move into the legal regulatory framework of the petroleum sector. So you can have an attractive geology. However, if the physical regime and the petroleum regime is not attractive, some companies might not come. But fortunately for Namibia, through the work of the government and our president, Geingob, our physical regime, legal regime is very stable. And additionally now, our geology now have become more attractive because of the recent discoveries we've done. And then to add that, you realize that there has been an emergency of moving into green energy. And then that has brought a lot of doubts in some investors whether if we move into this country and we are looking at oil and gas exploration, will we be accommodated? And through the visionary leadership of President Geingob, he brought in policy certainty when the National Energy Policy of 2017 was approved by government and implemented. So it's through that energy policy of 2017 where Namibian's energy approach was laid out, that our energy approach is an energy mix.
It's going to be an energy mix.
Yeah, so we promote fossil fuels, all forms of energy, renewable, to ensure that we have security of supply, which is the most important things. And in that same document, the energy policy, it also policy statements on promoting investment in upstream oil and gas exploration. And then it went further, that same policy laid the foundation for what we are having now, like, for example, the need to have a sovereign wealth fund. So that is the need to ensure that the money we are getting from the oil and gas will be used sustainably for the future generation. And we can diversify that into other sectors.
100%.
Yeah.
You wanted to add, before I bring in Mr. Ayuk, you wanted to add value to the question of the investors here.
Yes, I wanted to just add a bit of context, but Shakwa has touched on that. But what I wanted to touch on is on the latter. We said that President Geingob really believed in energy as an inclusive path towards economic industrialization. Because one would ask, why oil and gas? Why green industries? It was for one goal. It's economic emancipation for the country of Namibia. And hence the energy mix, because he believed that it does not matter what form of energy it is, but as long as it can come and eradicate poverty for my people, as long as it can come and end energy poverty for my people, we have to do it. That's why it's that confidence in the investor that they two can coexist, whether be it the green energy or the oil and gas, they can work together complementary so that, number one, they bring about benefits to the country as per the Harare Prosperity Plan, pillar number 2 of economic advancement. And then secondly, as a nation, so we become mature in how to handle these kind of energies and learning from those that have gone before us. But really to answer the question of what attracts the investor, as Shakwa has highlighted, is the rule of law in a country. Because you can look, even the green hydrogen or the green industrialization agenda, we are preparing very well. We are having a lot of investment in the country amid a firm legal framework. Why is that? It's because there is rule of law. There's a precedent that said that if you take your investment to Namibia, amid the absence of this, the yes is the yes and the no is the no. That comfort is very important.
Mr. Ayub, I just want to quickly bring you in here. So while we're still talking about that, we know, of course, investment, and you've always said that investment doesn't always just include cash. It's not always money. What do you think the president envisioned the oil and gas industry can do for Namibia? Because remember, you awarded him also for his the endeavors.
I mean, this great man deserves so much credit for really taking on the oil and gas industry and even the grain industry and saying, I want my people to be part of it. I want my people to benefit from it. I was very lucky to have spent a considerable amount of time with him, one-on-one conversations about energy. And I've never talked to a president with so much depth and also so much knowledge on what this industry could mean for his people. That was always the first thing. And we discussed discussions around looking at regional power pools, what, as Shakwa mentioned, energy security, energy independence. So that vision was already there. But when these systems are already in place, you would see it trigger down to everyday citizens. Because at the end, this is what this industry needs. There was these big discussions. I think he asked me when we were in Cape Town, quietly about my views on what Namibia should be looking around local content. How you going to drive up a workforce? How you going to get Namibians to not only be on the periphery, but active participants in their development? That is what you really need to start looking at. But also, it was that discussion on a bigger challenge when you look at the people. It's not right for 6, 7 Namibians to all trying to do the same thing with having logistic companies. It's not right fight for 6, 7 Namibians try to say, because Shakwa is doing this, I got to do that. Because France is doing this, I got to do that. Maybe it might make sense for them to come together and then have strong companies to really be able to compete. Because at the end of the day, you would have to compete with international service providers, international companies coming in. But I think that bold vision that he had and which he really placed was something that drew a lot of admiration from many people outside Namibia. And I think that should be commended, but also that should be carried on. One of the key things I did over the last weekend, had a good chance to talk with the First Lady, and one of the key words she told me was, we need to carry on that message. That work doesn't just stop now to ensure that Namibians benefit from their resources. Because at the end of the day, I'll tell you something, nobody's going to come from outside Namibia and do that beneficiation part for you. Wakanda Forever is a good movie, but the Black Panther is not coming. I think Namibians will have to do this by themselves.
100%. Thank you very much, Ayuk, for that as well. I think the important thing for me is also, Mr. Ayuk, is how this positions Namibia within the greater conversation of energy security for Southern Africa, within SADC and, of course, largely the continent. Can you reflect a little bit on that?
Huge, so bigly would you see that. I tell you why. You're receiving about 200 megawatts of power every day from South Africa. South Africa is in an energy crisis. What happens today if South Africa pulls back at 200 megawatts? Namibia would be in the dark. I think Namibia has an amazing opportunity to do gas to power and maybe with building a hydrogen industry. That could happen, but it's still got some time. You would see more. But you have the Southern African power pool that's working so well. You could be able to move your gas and drive that right in. Think about some of the things we've not been able to see being done around Kudu gas. You could use less than 1 TCF and get an amazing gas strategy where you move into pet camps and really bring in fertilizer. Most people understand with vast land, massive agricultural potential, with fertilizers, you ramp up agriculture and that energy security stands there. But you have an amazing opportunity to look at and see where Mozambique has been holding back with issues around Cabo Delgado to be that beacon of hope across Southern Africa. But you have to also think big. Global energy security, climate change, energy poverty. You are going to get your resources into global systems at the same time while beneficiating that. So this, I wouldn't call it a tiny country, but 2.5 million people can play a really big role across the globe, just the same way that Qatar is playing. But it would have to take real precision, real force, real direction to say, we're going to have to put this forward and we're going to have to be a little humble as we go into this approach. And I think that can work really well. Namibia can come out big time.
Thank you very much, Ayuk, for that. I want Kalenga to quickly come in there as well, but Shale, I had a question, particularly on just adding on to what he was saying about the regional positioning and how we see Namibia growing on the continent. Just reflect on that a little bit from the perspective of Recon. Is this a long-term investment? And how do you see yourselves positioning yourselves, not only in Namibia, but I think the support for the rest of the region?
Absolutely, Ricardo, and it would be for any investor, any oil and gas investor currently now in Namibia. We are onshore, currently the only active ones onshore, and we have we don't have a discovery yet. The discoveries are offshore, but ours is long term. Any investor, and I think the fact that oil and gas is such, you are in it for the long run. It's not an overnight. You're not in it for 2 years, 3 years, and thinking, okay, in 5 years' time I don't have anything, so I'm moving out. So it's in it for the long run. And just as NJ also said, the gas to power, we're not only looking at what is it that especially for us who are working from the country, who are working for the IOCs. We're not just looking at what is it that benefits the IOC itself, but what is it that benefits the country as a whole. We are in the region where we are working, the Kavango East and Kavango West is considered the poorest of the regions in the country. We see poverty every day. So us is to imagine what is the impact, the direct impact, the bread and butter issues on the table that we can solve at that time, at that position. And again, that's that's why gas to power is such an important conversation. While we may have started off as just looking for the hydrocarbon, for the oil side, us getting the gas side also, and now also shifting a lot of interest towards the gas, it's extremely important because we look at the long-term energy security for the country as well as for the SADC or even the entire continent in the long run.
Frans?
Yes, that's a very, very good conversation. And that I'm reminded to say, like, especially with NAMCO and Petro Fund, because if you are talking about really value and being an energy hub, it's very important that on capacity and skills development. So with NAMCO, through the Petro Fund, where we are able to educate fellow Namibians through scholarships and also offering internship at NAMCO, we are doing this so that there is skills. The skills to do what? When NJ was mentioning about what is it that we can be in the global sphere, we could be an energy hub. Why is this? We have all the critical raw minerals around. These are input parameters that we are talking about the energy transitions. Now, we are talking about the oil and gas. But what is lacking is, because for far too long, we have been in a space whereby we extract these resources and then we just ship them out. But what is important for us to be able to achieve that is to move into secondary and tertiary sectors where manufacturing comes now and putting hubs. That if we are going to have, let's see, the oil and gas, how does those produce come and start being...
So start developing the downstream side of things.
Start developing the downstream, the midstream, so that there is more participation of the local, and then we create industries. Once you create those industries, you start now selling skills, and you start already value-added products. So that will be the vision, I think, and also because you can have already seen that the Ministry of Mines and Energy have put up a moratorium of sending out, is it lithium? Speaking under correction.
Say that not without there must be some level of value addition.
There's some level of value of addition. Yeah. And that will be in a position whereby we are able even to produce now power to be able to give to South Africa that's already struggling, to the South African power pool, because energy has become a scarce commodity. And whoever that controls that energy, the one that have it in abundance, control the geopolitics of the country.
If I can maybe also just add to what Kalenga is saying, the value chain, and this is an important, the ministry has done so well in now already speaking about local content, the value chain for oil and gas is very long. It's not just to say that you need to be the one who's drilling in the ground and you need to be the one who's taking the product out of the country. And that is where we, for us who are in the sector, need to make sure that we educate the Namibian people, we inform the Namibian people of how long the value chain is and where we can fit ourselves in so that we can capacitate people along the entire value chain. And that is how we're going to get meaningful impact and also meaningful beneficiary from this oil and gas.
Shaka, I've got a question for you, but I know that you wanted to add value to this first before I can...
You can go ahead. Right. I think they've said it.
One of the concerns, really, I mean, not really a concern, but a question from my end is, we're talking about, of course, I think there was a number dropped last year. Was it $7 billion worth of support services for oil and gas over the next couple of years? There were some figures that were being dropped, but we're looking at billions of dollars in terms of support services. But we also know, for example, oil and gas, just like green hydrogen is a new industry, oil and gas is established already, but still has specialized skills. Reflect a little bit, Shakwa, on that nexus between the law and now, of course, not only just investment, but geology and that specialized skills that are required for us to be able to benefit from this huge capital injection that goes into support services by the international oil companies.
Thank you, Ricardo. I think Kalenga touched on it to talk about the human skills or human resource capacity. So we need to capacitate more. That is the first thing, because you need to learn the industry, understand how it works. That makes it easier for you to set up a business in a line or subsector you have chosen within the industry. Whatever services you are doing, whether it's consultancy, technical, and then you are able to focus on that and deliver it at a level which is internationally or globally accepted. So first you need to acquaint yourself with the industry, the happenings, the different skills, the different services which are being provided, because the drilling, let's take an example of drilling now. Total Energies of Shell or hire a drilling company to do the drilling for them, you know. There's a lot of services within that component. The services which are provided by some of the big upstream service companies, like the Halliburton, the SLB, you know, in terms of the wireline logging, in terms of the mudding, the cementing, all that comes with skill. But you don't need to do complicated or, you know, tertiary education to get a master's to get those skills.
So specialized training institutions are also sort of an opportunity for business.
That's a big opportunity for business, because to be able to be a painter offshore in the rig, to be an electrician, even if you are doing it now for ordinary construction, that's still not enough. You need to be certified for that, you know. And those are some of the short courses which can be done easily in other jurisdictions. But we could set up those institutions, and we could enhance the institutions we are having in Namibia, like the mining ones, the NIMT, and then the vocational training centers which we are having. We could empower those institutions so that they can be able to deliver those skills. So once we have those skills now, it makes it easier for you to go out there and compete. That's how it has developed in countries like Nigeria, for example. They started by learning the trade and then getting good at it, and then getting into the business, so that now you can take and leverage on whatever business you're doing. Because if you rush into it without the necessary know-how, and everybody is rushing into it, like NJ said, they all want to do the same thing, they heard you can do this, you all crash. Only those who have learned it and mastered it are the ones who are going to go through. So you don't need to rush. That's the thing. What you need is to learn and master, and then you can be able to partake. Sometimes we rush a lot as Namibians, but I urge Namibians, learn more and partake in the industry so that you can be able to do other things.
100%. If you just join us, of course, you're watching a special program as we continue to celebrate the legacy of the late great statesman, that is, of course, Dr. Hage G. Geingob. One of the things that we knew about President Geingob was that he was adamant about the economic prosperity of Namibians. If you look at his, of course, Harambe Prosperity Plan 1 and 2, that we have both geared and focused on fast-tracking, that is, of course, development priorities in certain areas, including now what we're discussing today, the oil and gas industry. What were his aspirations, and what does the future look like for Namibians is the focus. Mr. Anyuk, I want to just bring you back in here in the conversation. Of course, you're joining us from the Africa Energy Chamber. As you can see, we've got a stellar lineup of panelists here. Shakwa Nambe from SNC Incorporated giving us the legal perspective. We've got Ms. Ndapewashali Shaponale from Recon Africa, representing the IOCs, and of course NAMCOR as a government-owned player within the sector. Ayuko, of course, joining us as the Executive Chairperson of the African Energy Chamber online. I just want to throw the question around the conversation on that transformation of corporate social investment, of CSI traditionally as we know it, into what we now know as ESG, which focuses now on the three legs of environmental, social, and of course governance aspect. Our president was very, very clear around transparency and accountability in this industry. Reflect a little bit on how we can ensure that we continue that legacy of transparency and accountability, particularly within the context of ESGs, and how do we encourage companies to move away from greenwashing and really actually doing practical, measurable and impactful interventions when it comes to their ESG.
Thanks for that. I think it is an amazing question, especially during giving these times. But before I get into that, I just wanted to pick on the last round conversations and say we need to create Namibian champions. Pick 10, 15, 20 Namibia champions empower them, drive them, and then ensure that they are successful. Because there is a special difference when you see a Namibian doing so well, like the three panelists you have there, then a young Namibian would look at them and say, I can be a Shakwa tomorrow, I can be a Shapanele tomorrow, and I don't know if I want to be a Frank Kalenga tomorrow, but I love him. I can be a Frank Kalenga tomorrow and really do that, because when you do that, you get in Namibians to believe in themselves rather than seeing someone else and with that place. So that is important. When it comes to ESG, I think, ESG has been misused so much that the energy industry get accused of. The issue is not about, when you come to climate change around ESG, it's not about climate, it's about emissions in the air. Let's figure out how we capture that greenhouse gas emissions in the air. But I think for Africa, and especially for Namibia, it's continuing what Frank has mentioned, the rule of law, and Chaco has talked about it, regulatory environment, governance. Governance is so important for Africans and Namibians because that's how you're going to keep the continuous flow of cash, continuous ensuring investor confidence, continue giving for the guarantees that this can work. The social, everyday people cannot be left back. You got to drive that. This is bigger than corporate social responsibility. So you look at building local content, regulations or laws, whatever the Namibians deem necessary, because that creates that multiply effect, multiply jobs and everything. But education, it still fits within that S in the social, because at the end of the day, integration without preparation is frustration. And you would see that a lot in the energy industry. The environment, you're already doing well. Namibia is on a path to net zero by 2050. Any kind of greenhouse gas emissions that you're going to have from your gas or oil production, you're going to offset that with green hydrogen. But you should not be ashamed of producing oil and gas, and you should not apologize for it. And I think that's why you saw the president understood that it's an energy mix and it's an all of the above kind of energy. The energy companies are not going to engage in greenwashing in Namibia, and I'll tell you why. They're going to use some of the greatest technologies, some of the newest technologies to really produce oil or natural gas in Namibia. So Namibia benefits from that. You're not going to see what has happened in Nigeria in the past where you saw oil spills. You're going to see a lot of new technologies, new equipment, and innovation is going to be tested. And you've seen that with the drilling campaigns that have happened where people thought there was nothing, but with new technologies, they could look at the subsurface and look at the geology again, and they could see different stuff. So I'm more confident that you're going to see a test case for how energy is produced for the world, and Namibia is going to showcase that. And you need to keep, but of course, you need to keep a tight regulatory environment to really say, do not flare gas, try to find ways to monetize that gas. And if you monetize that gas, this 2.5 million country would become a supply side for the world and for the region. My mama always say, if you're selling, you're making money. If you're buying, you lose it. So Namibia is going to be selling a lot to Angola, South Africa, and across Africa and the world. So that is, to me, a big part of the ESG. And women are going to play a big role in that.
You're literally grabbing the words out of my mouth, but I want to just reflect on what you're saying in terms of the continent. We know, of course, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is active now as we speak. We can trade with goods and services. We are still tightening up the service industry part of it. But we know Dr. Geingob was a big Pan-Africanist and an advocate for intra-Africa trade. Reflect very briefly, of course, on is Africa speaking the same language when it comes to the energy transition globally, and reflect a little bit on the trade aspect of the energy, both oil and gas, and of course the renewable as well within the region and continentally?
Unfortunately, we're not speaking the same language when it comes to the transition, because Africa is not a monolith. I mean, Namibia is going to be producing a lot of oil, a lot of natural gas, a lot of green hydrogen. So Namibia is going to see things differently in the future as a producer compared to, let's say, just look at a country like Kenya that is not doing that. So Kenya is going to rely a lot on geothermal. But our diversity means something, e pluribus unum, out of many we one. But I also believe that when that part of that trade, that is something that I think Dr. Geingob was so visionary in it. Namibia signed the AFTA agreement, one of the first countries to get on board. It was amazing what they did there. And they showed leadership in those negotiations I was lucky to be part of. But when you look at that, 2.5 million people selling to 1.4 billion people. That is huge. So you have a big market, to play with, and you don't necessarily have to wait to sell into Europe or China or America, because you already have a market ready for your activity. So those who say that because of a transition, your energy is not going to be needed across the world, that is a lie, because you have 1.4 billion people who would need that. But we need to keep an eye on a just transition, because everybody has to count. Energy poverty is real, and Namibia is going to play an amazing role, as Dr. Geingob told me, in really solving that issue. So we must, in his name, take a commitment to really seeing that we play our own role, because what they did, and I'm close to this, what they did to free Namibia and set up these systems and processes, they did that without email, without cell phones, without Instagram or TikTok. I think this generation of Shakwa Shapanele and Howie Kajemba and Franz Kalenga, this is a generation with all the tools, all the instruments. They have to just take that fight further to really see how you get economic emancipation of Namibian people and African people alike.
Shakwa, I wanted to bring you in there, so you've been waiting for quite a bit. You wanted to add value to what I was saying?
Yes, I wanted to add on the aspect of transparency and accountability. I think President Geingob was a visionary leader. He knew exactly what investors, businesses are looking at. And you can see this from the policies, the strategies he implemented. If you look at the Harambee Prosperity Plan, one of the pillars is effective governance, and which talks about transparency and accountability. And he maintained that accountable and transparent institutions, such as the ACCs and others, will not be interfered with. Let them do their job. And one of the scorecards also of most of the investors, what they look at is there transparency and accountability in this country we're investing? And I think that's what has attracted investors to Namibia, because our transparency and accountability, it's another level. I think one of the best in Africa. We have the accountable institutions, minimum, no corruption at all, or minimum corruption, and those who are engaged in other activities are being dealt with. So that in itself is what attracted investors, because that is connected to the rule of law. And then accountability institutions are also being enhanced by the laws which were put in place, like in terms of dealing with all these corrupt or unaccountable issues which are happening. We have all those laws in place. So I think that part also played a role in ensuring that the investments in whichever sector in Namibia, was very attractive. And then I think that's a legacy which we should always remember of President Geingob.
Yes. I think, Ricardo, 3 points before I lose my train of thoughts. On accountability part of, President Geingob believed that every nation should be given a fair chance to develop fully. However, cognizance that we all live in one planet. Now, that is very important because it comes to the accountability that we all exist in one planet, and we need to be accountable of what we put out there. Our laws, we have one of the best laws in the world in terms of environment. So any operations that are taking place in the oil and gas, there is that accountability that there is no harm to the environment. Now, before I divert slowly to that, when you ask the question about social corporate responsibility, it's important to note that in Namibia, we don't live in a federal state where each region is given something to develop by themselves or whatever opportunities that are derived there are for that region. Hence, now, corporate social responsibility need to be enforced that if you are doing in that region, at least let there be maximum impact, because the proceeds that will come from whatever you are mining or whatever you are drilling will come back to one pool, which is central government, and then they will distribute it equally in terms of road infrastructure, healthcare, and everything. But social corporate responsibility should not be a mediocre. It should be a real impact directly to the people that are living there. Concluding on my point, NJ said that we really need to champion certain institutions or certain people to move forward and derive value for the oil and gas industry. If you look at the companies like Schlumberger, Halliburton, or even the Shell, these are companies that were promoted by their governments. ExxonMobil, their governments, they really champion that. We are going to choose Ricardo. He is going to be our next ExxonMobil, or he's going to be our next Schlumberger, and we rally behind together and support and give all the necessary support that is required. Yes, it might be, it's Chakwa is saying that we need to learn, but this is a high-intensive industry, and it's very territorial. They will just also not just welcome you that, yes, come and learn the skill. So without that forcefulness, for lack of better word, or without that understanding, whether from the government or from the industry, that we want to develop our own people, it will never happen. So we need to be pragmatic in our decision-making, that if you are going to have a country manager in this country, understudy this one, and you have this amount of years to pass on knowledge so that we are able to retain skills. Those decisions needs to come out. On their own, because I want to learn, it will never happen. And they will show you what you need to learn, because it's a high secretive confidentiality industry. But with the help of that government, and I think this is what President was envisioning, that one day Namibia will become very, very skillful in driving our own agendas.
A knowledge-based society, and I think this is the time, I think the apt opportunity for Recon Africa to join us, of course, to reflect on that discussion, particularly on the CSI and the ESG.
Yes, thank you, Ricardo. I just want to add what my brother said here. It really goes back to meaningful impact and meaningful participation, and meaningful, not like you, I think it was Kalenga, or you said greenwashing. It's the meaningful one, and it cannot be done if we leave it to us, the IOCs alone. There has to be meaningful, intentional approach, such as the local content policy approach, such as NAMCOR making it intentional that you have to upskill our people, because the truth of the matter is that we are in such a good position because we have the people who are drilling engineers for 40 years, petroleum engineers for 40 years, and we have these people at our disposal for free to transfer the skills to us. So I think the operative word really is meaningful. What is it that we are doing from our side intentionally and meaningfully? And then I also want to touch on the environment. Angie spoke about how we're doing Namibia in protecting our environment, as well as Kalenga also speaking about our regulations. And just briefly, not to do a lecture or anything, I think that we can really applaud our government, and we can applaud ourselves as Namibia in terms of, like Kalenga said, our Environmental Act. If I just have to briefly take you through the process of getting that permission to even just put up, even to just start scouting for where you want to drill, you first need to have an environmental impact assessment. This is a study that is done by a third party, and it has to tick so many boxes, answer so many questions. This EIA then has to be approved by the Environmental Commissioner. After this, then once this is approved, you then have to have environmental management plan, where you basically say, okay, you say you want to do these activities in the environment, we are approving these activities, there are these impacts, positive, as well as also relatively, you are impacting because you are moving a bush, or you are passing by someone's hut where there was no car passing by in the future. How are you going to manage this? You have your environmental management plan, which needs to be approved by the Environmental Commissioner. Then only you get your environmental clearance certificate to say that, okay, you told us what it is that you want to do, you told us how you're going to manage the impacts, and now we're going to tell you that you can do this. And even on top of that, there are the constant inspections, the constant any activity, whether you are drilling a water well, or you are building a road, or you are taking one tree or bush out, you need to have a permit or a license for that. So in terms of the regulation, and again, the rule of law, And again, Namibia to be applauded for this, for that, which is also another attractive for an IOC. Namibia, when it comes to our regulation of this industry, and especially oil and gas activity in the environmental safe, I think that we really need to be, really need to give an applause to the country. Of course, also to President Geingob for his visionary leadership in crafting some of these laws.
I want to stay with you quickly on that, and I think we've spoken a lot on the E side and on the G side of things, governance, on the transparency, accountability. On the environmental side, I think, like you're saying, the EIA process, the environmental management plan, and of course the rehabilitation and even closure for that purpose in terms of mining. But on the social end, talk to us about perhaps those meaningful activities that Recon as an IOC has taken.
Thank you, Ricardo. We all know that Recon Africa is still in the exploration stage of oil and gas. We still have some years to go before we can even say that this is our first oil, first profit. But it is important, and again also how the rule of law is set up in Namibia for impactful, meaningful benefits now already. A good example is that we've only been in operation for 3 years now. So far, we've already committed 112 million Canadian dollars to our ESG program, and this is goes to education, goes to health, goes to water provision, goes to wildlife management. A good example is that in the 3 years that we were there, we've engaged with our stakeholders, because again, as an IOC, I cannot just come into a region or into an area or into a country and decide that I feel that you need iPhones, so I'm providing you with iPhones. We needed to listen to the people on the ground. The loudest need there was water, and to date we've drilled in the 3 years 36 water wells. This is water wells that we drilled according to the specifications of the Ministry of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform, which again speaks to collaboration with government, and that is exactly what government talks about, meet us halfway, and this has impacted tens of thousands of people in the region. Water is such a scarce commodity, and water is life, and we were able to answer that. Further to that, on the education, there was no way as an IOC that we'll be able to leave out education. We speak to Kalenga has also, I think, benefited from the skills transfer by spending time on our rig side, and this is to really get the meaningful skills transfer from the experts, from the expatriates who come in to do the work. Again, further to that, on top of, because as petroleum operators, we all have to contribute to Petrofund, and this is to send students out there to go study in the areas of petroleum law, in the areas of petroleum engineering. But then as a company, Recon Africa, we decided that we want to go the extra mile and identify 5 students from either regions, Kavango East, Kavango West, and say that we are going to send you to school to study in this direction, so that we can also absorb you at one point. And this is us going a mile further. And further to that, also, like you said, the social. We cannot ignore that the area that we are in has a certain historic identity. We know that in our areas we have the San community, which are the marginalized. And when you hear from a student who is in grade 11 and says that all her life she has gone to clinics and she has never been treated by a nurse, a San nurse, that immediately there needs to be meaningful impact, and that is why we decided that we're going to take 7
So being also cognizant of the cultural environment within which you're operating.
Absolutely, it is very, very important, and that speaks. I mean, the land, we are onshore, and we know that the land belongs to the state, but the traditional authorities are the custodians of the land, and therefore we need to know exactly how do we speak to the Ukwangali traditional authority, how do we engage with the Hambukushu traditional authority, what is it that is our surroundings, because it's only when you consider all of this and you operate within what is customary right, what is ethically right, that you can say that you are really
having that meaningful
impact and meaningful operation and engagement with the society, with the social setting that you find yourself in.
Shakwa, you need to add some value there.
Yes, just on the ESG part, and I think we should give credit. Sometimes we don't give enough. We should give credit to what Recon Africa has done in Namibia, in particular in the 2 Kavango regions, Kavango East and West, in terms of their ESG, the money they've spent, in terms of the boreholes they've drilled. But let me leave that for now. But I wanted to talk on the ESG to say, I think as a country, as a government, we should be very intentional that all components of ESG should be adhered to. There is always this thing that most of the company or some of the company focus on the E and the G. So they leave the S. And the S is very vital. And it's upon us as the regulators, on which the resources vest to say, there's this component of the S. The people want to feel that they are part of this industry. They want to feel that they have benefited. What have you done to this community? Have you done any educational infrastructure, any sports infrastructure, any scholarships, and the like? At the end, they want to see what has the energy sector done for us. The same question they'll ask, what has the diamond sector done for us? So that should be emphasized also, I think, going forward as a country, that the S is a very important component of the ESG as well.
Well, I think, Ricardo, just on that one, on the S, briefly, it needs to be coordinated. That is one. Two, it needs to be impactful and meaningful. What do I mean by this? Everybody is busy doing something in the name of corporate social responsibility. But most of the time, it's just for the camera or it's for the company. So it needs to be coordinated to say, if Ricardo social corporate responsibility is investing in hospitals, let it be in hospitals. If Kalenga is it about school, let it be in school. Because otherwise you'll find a lot of companies doing everything at the same time.
Because it's maybe hot. It's like the COVID time. It was hot, so everybody was buying masks, buying PPE suits, etc.
Yes, but then there's no impact. You come and realize that all of you were busy doing the same thing, but there's a big aspect of it that was being neglected. At some point, in my own view, there will have to be a regulation of ESG that will get the message home. Because then the social aspect part of it, you will be accountable. Because again, it comes back to accountability. How do you hold accountable to Recon or to Shakwa Nyambe that have you done this for this community? For now, it's being done as how I wish. So that is very important. That's what I wanted to bring in.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Ricardo. I just want to, and it speaks exactly to what I said earlier on. One of my responsibilities is stakeholder engagement. And I need to be able to take the feedback back from what is it that my stakeholder is saying, what is the truly impactful, meaningful need of this area. And also with our approach, ESG approach to business, our ESG framework, our ESG monitoring, our ESG reporting. We cannot go out there and just say we are splashing $10,000 on whatever it is. What is the impact? What is the meaningfulness? And our scholarships is a very good example. We are sending these kids through school from first year until they finish, so that you can never, even if this student does not work for Recon Africa, this degree you can never take away from them. They can work offshore, they can work onshore. Those are the meaningful, long-standing, sustainable, when it comes to the S in social. What is like Kalenga said, it has to be checked, it has to be regulated. Because am I throwing money at something, or am I making sure that it is sustainable by investment right now? Water wells, for example. The country, and especially in the regions that we are operating in, we have a human-wildlife conflict with the people of the area depending on the river for water. And we needed to make sure that we don't just decide that we're going to one area and putting a water well up. The sustainable, meaningful impact would be to say, how do we make sure that the people are living across a river do not have to go to the river again for water, so that they do not become victims of human-wildlife conflict by crocodile attacks. That now takes care of our impactful capacity in the S of ESG, making sure that we keep the people away. We're not just putting up a water well because it looks good. Our impact, sustainable, meaningful, long-term impact is that we are moving a community away from the human-wildlife conflict, at the same time providing them with fresh water.
100%. I just want to bring in Mr. Ayuk here. I'm sure that we have to let you go soon. But just on this, I think one of the most important things, and of course the conversation is taking place in the context of celebrating the legacy of Dr. Geingob and of course highlighting his aspiration. Mr. Ayuk, You presented as the Africa Energy Chamber last week, the president with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Please talk to us about what was the motivation behind providing or giving him this achievement award, and what message did you want to send to the rest of the continent with conferring this award, and what were you exactly recognizing with this Lifetime Achievement Award from the Africa Energy Chamber to Dr. Hage Geingob last year?
Thank you for that. I just want to chip in a little bit on the discussions around ESG. I think from my experience, what I've seen worked really well across the continent with a lot of countries is maybe the ministry has a very strong program that takes into consideration the entire country and then sits down with the energy companies and assign them specific projects in specific regions, and then the reporting comes back to the ministry, and then you get that out. I think getting any company to do what they do, it sometimes becomes counterproductive, as most of the other panelists have said. When it comes to the president receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, it was something that we debated very strongly across the African Energy Chamber and our board. But we went on to look at the enabling environment, helping companies to come in, stay, and work and operate within the companies. They're doing business and making it easy to do business, welcoming investors in the country, but also maintaining the rule of law, that you could have a spirited legal framework, legal and regulatory framework that government could be taken to courts and government could get bid in court, unlike many other African countries where you didn't see that, but also being open to taking criticisms. But when the energy industry looks at itself and it looks at this continuous welcoming environment, it was so befitting to honor this man who looked at that and said, we could still be able to do green hydrogen, and I would drive it, I would push it as hard as I can, as well as we could still be able to produce oil and natural gas. But most importantly, what has been lacking in most of Africa, he demonstrated that by saying, we are going to really focus on governance, because those governance structures are really, really important in order to drive that. And I think that demonstration, backed by his government and all Namibians, has been something that most people have not looked up to, but we need to really take a deep look at that and study that and really see that Namibia is showing a model, has shown a model under his leadership to ensure that this continues coming. And sometimes it's not just talk, but you can look at the results. The results will continue to show more companies willing to invest in that country, more companies willing to take a look at new possibilities there, and it's opening it up for business. I think that legacy is something that was really big. When we were looking at him last year, we weren't thinking about standing here today to have this discussion, but we were looking at him to drive that forward. And I think that it was, contrary to what most people believed, it was a befitting honor. And it's really important for us as Africans to recognize our own, to encourage our own, nurture our own, and drive our own to be where we hope them to be. Don't wait until someone passes on for you to say they were good men. I choose to be with that group of Africans that I tell you, keep going, keep moving while you're still alive. I think Dr. Geingob did something that was really amazing. He passed the rope. He climbed up those mountains, and then he looked down and looked at the younger people and passed that rope and said, keep climbing, keep climbing, keep climbing these mountains, because I have bigger mountains to climb. And I think he looking at us high from up there, he'll be proud of what he sees his country going forward. So I thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ayuk, for making time out to join us. And of course, I know the partnership with the Africa Energy Chamber is quite an important one for the country, and we look forward to this year's Africa Energy Week. Thank you so much for making time out to be with us. Well, of course, the chairperson of the Chamber of the Africa Energy Week, or the Africa Energy Chamber, rather, speaking to us. They're the ones responsible for organizing the Africa Energy Week, where they conferred the Lifetime Achievement Award to Dr. Geingob. As we're moving to the summit of the conversation for today, I just want us to reflect on the man himself and his legacy. Frans, from your side, what is the kind of legacy that Dr. Geingob leaves behind, and how do you want us to continue that as Namibians?
Thank you, Ricardo. I think I want to conclude with a saying in my mother tongue. The saying goes like, "Mkwenya kukwasa kulila yo awenya tabuka mutwe." Basically what means, a person that is helping you mourn, yourself, you need to crack your head. You can't expect the person coming to help you mourn, crack their head, than you that has been affected. Why do I say this? We have seen the recognition that is from the African Energy Chamber. These people are not Namibian. We have seen the recognition that he has gotten to from COP28. So these are the people that appreciate it. So what is expected of us that this man led? This man is leaving a legacy that we might not have seen or might have appreciated, but going forth, because that gap, that void is there, we start appreciating that his legacy was economic emancipation of this country. And from NAMCO's side, we have a fully equipped and competent workforce to make sure that we are ready for the production of this oil and gas. We also know that we are resolutely committed into embracing the energy transition. Some of these big oil and gas companies, they are the biggest investors in the green energy industrialization. So having them in the country to make sure that we are going to produce this oil with less carbon footprints, with cognizance of to the environment, that the environment is safe, is key. And we need to work so hard that his vision of the Harambe come to fruition. His death doesn't change, but it just charges us to work more harder so that his death is not in vain. I would conclude.
Definitely. Apro Shali?
Ricardo, I think you start off with a man who has given his entire life to this country, and literally to the day of his death, serving this country for 60 decades and over. Just on a personal level, that alone teaches, it took me back to, I call myself very patriotic to the Namibian nation. And it teaches us really to just go back and say how much we should love this country, and how much do we love this country, and how patriotic are we to this country, and how much are we willing to put in for this country, to serve this country. And if we look at his work during the liberation struggle with our other heroes, and the commitment to making to Namibia's economic emancipation, we are here in these positions today. We are able to be educated today. We are able to be holding positions, executive positions in international companies, because the soil was fertile, because someone worked the soil, someone plowed, someone watered, someone fertilized the soil. So I think from the legacy, really, that what I would take away, what we should take away, is the commitment to the commitment to the Namibia, the commitment as a patriotic person, and the commitment that we are in certain positions, in certain sectors in industries, to really have that meaningful impact and also meaningful contribution to where Namibia can go in terms of economic emancipation and really meaningful development. It cannot be that 20 years down the line or 10 years down the line, what Dr. Geingob, His Excellency, wanted for us 30 years ago is what we'll still be dreaming about. He has fertilized the soil, he has prepared the soil, he has watered, he has planted us as seeds, and we have to flourish for his legacy.
Mr. Nyambe.
Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. I think President Geingob was the epitome of leadership. For me, he was one of the best presidents in this world, not only in Africa. And there's a lot has been said about him. But I think the legacy he leaves behind is, firstly, he had so much belief and confidence in the young people. He believed in their intelligence, in their vision, and he appreciated, you could see what he has done with his appointments of people who are having some of the big positions in governments. Even for people in private sector, a leader who will even admire the work you are doing without having met you and tell people that I like what this young man is doing. Those are true leaders. Some will not even admire you, but it means that it's a leader who was focused. He has a good ear on the ground. He was checking what was happening in the country. And then he's a leader who believed in rule of law. Believed that through the rule of law and all the policies, the systems, the institutions, if we harness that, we will be able to attract more investment into the country. And you can see from the policies which he put in place, which I already spoke about earlier, that's what attracted more investors in the energy sector, And he believed also in the transparency and accountability to say, you might have all these good laws and policy, but for you to maintain this and keep it going, you need it to be transparent and accountable. And through the institution he has promoted, he has enhanced and promoted further the foreign investment in the country. So we are very grateful. We had a very, very great leader. And I think the country, Namibia, is set for prosperity, economic prosperity. I think that's what he leaves behind. We just need to go ahead with the tone he has set. There will be a lot of prosperity from the country, from all these different sectors of the country.
Thank you very much for making time out really to join me for this quite lengthy, but I think very, very important conversation that we've had. We've managed to cover all the points I think that we discussed beforehand. Of course, this is all in legacy of the President Hage Geingob, the statesman, but of course the aspirations for the oil and gas industry within the overall economic emancipation for Namibia.